This meeting is being recorded for the purposes of posting to GCTV. If any other persons present are also recording, you must notify the chair at this time. Is anybody else recording? Great. Hearing and seeing none. Moving on to the public comment portion of our agenda. Melissa, you will have 3 minutes to make your spiel. I can set up a little timer. When you are ready.
Oh, I was waiting for you to be ready. Do I just state my name?
Yes, please state your name and where you're from.
Melissa Webb. I am a parent of 3 GPS students, all in different buildings. So yay me. I'm just here. I feel like I've been part of the redistricting from a very early stage of development, and I've watched a lot of things happen. And I think for me, one of the very disheartening things that I've seen happen, and I'm not trying to like push back the wheel of time, but we did hire an outside consulting firm to come in and tell us our best options. And instead of as a committee, a district, looking at it and saying, oh, thank you for this, we tried to reinvent the wheel that somebody had already taken time and money and put into. I feel I'm still here to advocate for the K1, 2, 3, 4, 5 platform. I still think it could be done. I think there's a lot of pushback on it. I'm very happy to see that like hard lines are being drawn in the sand, because we're not the only district that does that. Many major cities that you live in do have very hard lines with very few exceptions for people being able to stay in buildings after they move. I also have a very strong concern for people who are moving and how we are tracking movement of people who are moving to different districts, but somehow still remaining in the same school. I have a neighbor across the street who has lived there now for a year and a half, almost 2 years, and started the new school year at Federal Street School last year. However, her child should have been starting at Newton. There could have been an exception made, and I just don't know about it. But from my understanding, they're like, no, we just went to school first day and no one said anything to us. So I've always been like, how are we handling that piece of kids who are already attending schools and making that happen? So I guess that's more summer forward thinking. But again, we hired someone to come in and give us options. And I feel like instead of following through with one, we just made up our own. And I know that both ASKP and Christine have done an amazing job trying to make it work. But at the same time, I'm over here like, why did we do that if we weren't going to listen to them? Like, I don't hire an electrician to come in and tell me how my plumbing should be in my house. I hire a plumber. I don't take the person who's like the apprentice and say, oh, okay, well, I'm glad that you feel that way. So I guess that's just where I am as to why we didn't take the outside advice from an outsider looking in who had no stake in the claim. Thank you.
That was perfectly 3 minutes, and I feel like you've had a lot of practice to get to that level of doing perfectly 3 minutes. Thank you for your comment, Melissa. Are there any other members of the public present? Any other public comments to comment? I don't see any. I don't hear any. So thank you again, and we will move on to our next agenda item, which is approving the draft minutes from the last meeting. That was April 9th. Can I get a motion to approve?
I move that we approve the meeting minutes from April 9th.
I second that, and then I think that we technically do have to vote, even though we both made and seconded the motion. So all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. We have approved the minutes from the April 9th meeting. The next item we might not actually have much on, and that is almost surely entirely related to my misunderstanding of the process that things were undertaking. definitely was. I put this agenda item on. This is the update on transportation related to redrawing boundaries. This was my understanding that we were going to have new bus routes to be able to understand the impact of children moving, but now I've been informed that those bus routes probably won't be run until August or so. It's irrelevant. We do not have the information to have the discussion at this time. So unless there's any other update that I am missing from our esteemed colleagues in the district, can we move
Nope,
right along?
there's nothing on busing. They told
Great.
us they'll do whatever we need them to do. So
Great. All right, moving right along then, unless, Anne, do you have any questions or
On
comments?
busing, nope, no new info, no new questions.
Perfect. All right, next item is an update on Green River School. And so I did receive a letter, which I'm not sure made it into the materials, but Dr. DeBarge had sent me a letter that was also signed by the mayor and the MSBA, the Massachusetts School Building Authority.
So I mailed the summary to them of what they had requested so that we could finally take Green River out of service. So they got that. They have since acknowledged that they have it. That was it. We have your letter. The chair of the school committee, the mayor, and the superintendent all have to sign it. We did. And we are starting to clean out Green River. Mike Boudreau, our facilities director, is going over there with all the principals and department heads to see if there's anything that we need that's there. Otherwise, we will start getting things on the school committee agenda to have declared surplus, maybe as soon as next week. And then we can start cleaning it out. And the intention is to have an item on the regular school committee agenda to discuss turning Green River back over to the city.
Excellent. Based on your understanding, do you believe that there will be a vote to that effect next week, or that will likely take place in July?
I believe that there was the potential for there to be a vote. Certainly if committee members aren't there yet, I think Glenn would move that, but I think I believe the agenda would reflect the potential for a vote.
Okay.
So we were looking to do the handoff of the school around September 1st. That would allow us to have time to do cleaning out. And that would also allow us to work with the city. We have, the schools we have our computer server there that is responsive. It needs to be there to run the things that are at Green River that continue to run, such as cameras. So we need the opportunity to work with the city to switch over anything that needs to be switched over in that regard, to get our technology out of the building. They're old, but we still have phone, handsets, desktop phones that we might be able to salvage for parts and things like that. So we're going to use that time to get everything out, and then it will be the city's prerogative to do whatever they decide with the building.
Indeed. I was hoping that the mayor would join us, because I would like to be able to communicate something with the public about where in the city does this decision live, so that people know where they need to go to advocate for what they would like.
Yeah, that we didn't talk. I have not talked to the mayor about that part, so I can't even tell.
Yeah, I know from the Building and Construction Committee, Green River School, shockingly enough, has been discussed. And there were two views on the committee. One would be in favor of entering some kind of a partnership with someone who would handle converting it into the sustainable housing, which does have a campaign pushing for. But there were also voices on the committee talking about the city's desperate need for offices. And so that is one other potential future for the building.
Yes, I think there are many potential futures for the building, and
Those are the
at-
two that were most heavily discussed.
yeah, and at the exact moment that that moves from the school committee's responsibility to the city's responsibility, they will decide what it is to do with that.
Not to make a, obviously I'm not weighing in on any decisions, that would be at the city, but one of the factors in the MSBA documentation that was signed by Mayor Martin many years ago, almost 10, actually it might be 10 years ago now. There is language in there about the way that the facility gets used. And if those conditions are not met, that could have some impact on the status of repayment of funds. So that may also be a factor that the city considers when it makes a decision about future use.
Indeed, they're the provisions around educational purposes.
Yeah, I wasn't remembering exactly what the language is, but it's in that realm, exactly what you just said. So they may want to consider that.
Yeah, I do wish that we had a little bit more clarity about just like where is that line between an acceptable use that's gonna not cost us money and an unacceptable use that is going to cost us more money than it's already going to cost us to do something with this building.
And also who we could talk to in order to get stipulations waived.
Well, I expect that MSBA's response will help in some of that. In my letter that I did send to Stacy as the chair of this subcommittee, I did speak to one of the options that has been being discussed with the mayor, that we hope, I think I made a pitch for potentially, if the city goes that way, meeting the requirements for educational use. I don't know if that's the case, but I think we would get some guidance when MSBA replies. So hopefully we will see. But the lines for capital expense, which that is one, when you look at the chart of accounts, those lines are on the city side of the ledger. So I think at this stage, the general thinking is that it would be a city scenario for addressing the repayment, if there is any. But
so yeah, ultimately will not come out of the school district's budget per se, only in the sense that the city overall is impacted and we are part of them.
Correct. That is the general thinking. I certainly am not the final decision maker on any of that, but when you talk about capital, all of those accounts do lie on the city side of the budget. But you're right. I mean, we get soup out of the same pot, to use Glenn's analogy from several weeks ago.
Indeed. Okay. I don't necessarily see that we need to have that much more discussion on this topic, except for, Anne, it seems to be our prerogative right now as to whether or not we would like to, recommend a vote happen next week and whether we would recommend the vote to relinquish the school. We obviously don't have to do that. They can hold the vote without us recommending they do or not in the full committee meeting. That is Glenn's prerogative. But we can either choose to do that now or we can not. And no.
My only question is, when will we be hearing back from the MS? I always forget the order of the letters.
Don't know. They had indicated to me when I originally spoke to them that, given the fact that there are no programs, excuse me, no students in the building, no programs to be moved, that they didn't think it would take the 6 months that it says we're supposed to notify. We are supposed to notify them 6 months prior to the building being taken out of service, which clearly did not occur 7 years ago. But that seemed to potentially have a positive impact on their timeline for a response. But I mean, I can try to check in with them Monday and see if they have a thought, but
I think that would be good. I'm more inclined to say, yeah, let's go ahead and recommend the vote. People have been waiting for this for so long. Let's keep momentum going.
Great. I'm of a similar mind.
So do I need to make a motion for us to recommend that the committee vote on the Green River School
I think
decommissioning?
to satisfy Robert's rules, yes.
Okay, I hereby move that this subcommittee recommend to the full committee to take a vote on decommissioning the Green River School.
And I second that motion. All in favor of that motion that we've both just motioned and seconded?
I
Say aye.
am in favor, shockingly.
Aye. Great. Okay, so that seems to be that for the Green River School. Moving on to the next item is reviewing the subcommittee's purpose and scope of responsibility. Now, I will just share that there seems to be multiple conversations happening with regard to this item, and I'll just lay them out. One is this committee is done, its work is done, and it is time for it to be decommissioned and move on to other work. Another version of that is actually the committee's scope is shifting as opposed to being completely decommissioned. And in particular, I know that there is discussions about other uses of school facilities and ways to collaborate with others using school facilities that some folks would argue falls under the scope of this subcommittee. Now, the reason that I have this on the agenda is because I would like to hear, I guess, from you, Anne, what you think the purpose of this subcommittee is. And if you think the work that you've identified to me in the past that you might like to do is served through this committee or needs to necessarily have its own space that perhaps doesn't yet.
I think what we're looking at right now is the implementation of the plans that have been made. And I do think it continues to fall under the scope of this committee because we have to make sure that the way things are implemented as various hiccups and obstacles arise do stay consistent with the vision for the district that this subcommittee is in charge of. So I'm of the opinion that it's a slight shift, but not even that radical of a shift as we work through the kinks and get this done.
Mhm.
We've done a lot of planning, but there's still like messaging alone. There's so many questions from the public that it is good to have a smaller group to come up with the answers that the committee at large can give so that we don't have 7 authors on one memo.
Yes, so I'm hearing what you're saying, and I would like to be mindful of the boundary line that occurs between setting policy and implementing policy. And the two are related. I'm actually of the mind that the two are very much related. And at the same time, one of them is our job, the other is not.
I would say where we are is we are in charge of making sure that not that implementing it, but making sure that if the way it's being implemented is going counter or causing problems for the part that is our side, that we can see that and offer guidance.
Okay. Thank you for sharing.
So I view the role of the subcommittee accountability to the re-envisioning.
The other element of this reviewing the purpose or scope of responsibility is I was reflecting on the fact that broadly as a full committee, we at one point had a racial justice subcommittee, but when the new members came on, such as myself and yourself, and we were reassigning and sort of re-envisioning the committees that we did have, it was decided that that actually was no longer a standalone committee, but actually the work of racial justice or other equity focused elements of our policy infuse the rest of the committees. And so I was wondering if we could also take a moment or two to talk about how we see the equity mission that we all share being held up by the work of this committee, and can we articulate how we are trying to advance equity in the district with the work of this subcommittee?
Well, I'd say the biggest way that this subcommittee is working towards equity is making sure that there is a standard set of rules that apply equally to everyone. And so that in itself is the biggest, because we had a system set up where people who were in the know were able to get access to things that people who were not in the know, or people who had the cars and could provide the alternate transportation, had access to far more choices of publicly funded schools. So part of it is the even playing field, which I think has been the major push of the work that we've done these past few months. And then I had another thought, but I've lost it. What was that other thought? It was the other half of what I had to say. Sorry. Um, yeah, but and then also if you looked at the numbers for the way our schools were divided, I mean, I grew up in the deep South, and if my town had numbers like that, there would be an intervention of some kind. But that's not Greenfield?
I mean, one would argue that we're intervening.
Yes.
That is the work of this committee, is the intervention and
Yeah, I
and
just
subsequent work of the
think
district.
that my talking was getting a little bit into dangerous territory there. But I think Christine wanted to say something.
I just wanted to make reference. I guess I was a little confused because I felt like we've done a lot of intervening to right some of those
Mhm, definitely.
inconsistencies. So I just wanted to, I guess,
Yeah,
check in with you in case we were not thinking in the same way.
no, it sounds like we're on the same page. I was saying that that has been the work of the committee. That's how it related to racial justice. Sorry, I must not have been clear enough because I was trying to recapture a lost thought.
Oh,
So my
that's fine.
apologies for my lack of clarity. Yes.
Good,
So what
thank
I was
you.
trying to say is that that is the primary way in terms of racial justice that this committee has functioned.
Great. I also think the shift that sort of got wrapped into this discussion of redistricting around moving the grade levels back will support equity in general by helping make sure that students are with the peers that best support them to be their best selves academically and otherwise. So I'm looking forward to seeing the impacts of those shifts as well. For full transparency, it is unclear if this committee is destined to continue in a formal capacity after next week's full committee meeting. So I just want to name that for folks. I think that we just articulated, especially you, Anne, just articulated a solid reason why it could or potentially should. And I would, if you feel called to do so, to share that during that time that we discuss those things next week, feel free to do so. Obviously, I'm not going to make you. Couldn't
I'll
even
come up with more eloquent phrasing before then.
But otherwise, that was sort of the reason that I wanted to have this, is just to revisit what are we doing here, and how are we supporting the broader mission of what our district is all about. Okay, with that, I do have is there more on that agenda item before we move on?
Don't think so.
Okay, I do have on here a call for future agenda items, but pending the outcome of whether or not we continue to be a subcommittee, it might not make sense. And if you have a future agenda item that does come to mind, you're always welcome to send me an email. Okay. With that. We
Well,
have
I do
now,
have, oh, sorry, I
yeah,
do have
no,
one question. When the full committee votes on Green River School, is there going to be anything else that would need to be done by this subcommittee on it? Or once that vote is done, we wash our hands, it's no longer our
to the
problem?
best of my knowledge, it's the latter, that once we've made the
Okay,
vote and it returns to the city, then it becomes the city's process. Like I had mentioned earlier, would I love to have a communication about what happens next that we could share with people? Yes. But we are not responsible for coming up with that next step.
okay.
And
I
have
guess
no
I was more of wondering, like, would the city need someone to be communicating with, or at that point, is it just with superintendent? So who would the
um,
city be talking to during that transition is the real
I'm
question.
imagining it. I'm imagining it becomes Karen
Okay.
who gets to take over that lovely role.
Sorry if it's a really obvious question. I just wanted to
No,
have it out there in plain.
no, appreciate that. All right. Any other items? All right. I'm looking for a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
I second that motion. All in favor? I think we have to do a roll call. Member Childs,
Aye.
me, Chair Sexton, also aye. With that, we have concluded the subcommittee meeting for redistricting on this, the 5th of June, 2024.